Hi, Dave.
Hey,
Yeah, well, it's getting a little bit lamer compared to, like the late war. Donald Duck was very adventuresome. Uh, then he matures into grander stories in the post-war period, and but then the intense effort that was there at the start starts to decline a bit, I think, and possibly he's suffering censorship. The very violent Donalds might have ruffled a few feathers.
maybe.
I think I did hit, there was something. There was some from the company about uh, the sort of extremes that Donald would go to at times. They wanted the more sort of placid, the more domestic Donald.
Hmm. I don't think I'd heard of anything specifically against him. Although in the 1980s, when people were getting upset about, music, rock and roll song lyrics, a tiny bit of that started looking towards comics. And I think somebody pointed out there was a lot of violence in a lot of the Donald Duck, Uncle Scrooge comics. That's really the only thing I can think of. And that didn't get a lot of traction, but there was a little bit of it. A little bit. Certainly, as time went on, Barks's worldview grew more and more pessimistic, more and more cynical as he went on.
Oh, really? So, where's some great examples of the cynicism? This is what era did the cynicism show?
Mm. Well, we're probably just at the very beginning of it. There's a couple of stories that I think we haven't gotten to yet, but when we get to them, I'll point them out. Uh,
Well, it
we get,
was always there, wasn't it? There was a certain
yeah,
cynic.
yeah, you're right. It's true. They were kind of always, Barks always had kind of a wry, sardonic view of humankind. And it was
A
always
lot
kind
of suspicions about people's real motives. There's
yeah,
something that comes through a lot. People have ulterior motives.
yeah,
Scrooge McDuck is, there was one of the stories is one I recall. That's when he's testing his wealth against the other duck. They end up both finding that they're even in everything, and the only thing you can determine
yeah,
who's the best is the length of the pile of saved string.
yeah. That's coming up. We haven't gotten to that one yet. Flint Heart Glomgold. Yeah,
Well, that was in this one.
that's right. You're right. You're right.
All right.
Yeah,
Ethics, pushback against Hellbach's little duck.
yeah,
Yeah, well, I would at least once I was imitating stuff I'd seen in Donald Duck at my uncle, and it was a bit abusive actually, but I saw it in Donald Duck, therefore I had to imitate it. You could perhaps you can imagine families if their kids took up some of the ideas in Donald Duck, they might
yeah. In a
uh,
way, that kind of explains my interpersonal relationship history to some degree.
Okay, the great AI. Karl Barks' Donald Duck comics have faced ethical pushback primarily on two fronts: political, ideological
Yeah.
criticism, especially from Marxist and post-colonial scholars.
Yeah.
Uh, Number two, concern about cultural representation and US foreign policy messaging. Right, mate. You did point out
Yeah.
there was something, some sort of production. Now they're mentioning one here, How to Read Donald Duck. I think this was one you pointed out to me,
Yes,
isn't it?
we talked about that before. Yeah, we've talked about that.
Argued that Disney comics, including Barks, functioned as vehicles of US capitalist ideology,
Right.
exporting consumerism, hierarchy, and dependency to the global south.
It's a pretty infamous book.
The comics is reinforcing bourgeois ideology and global inequality. Well, I'd say in not the 30s, the 40s, or the 50s, that was a cultural norm, wasn't it? I mean, they're quite openly imperialistic, if you go back to Teddy Roosevelt.
Oh, yeah. Well,
But they could have been right, because I think it's going to be demonstrated that nation states and well, actually empires actually don't always have the fondest of regard for each other,
no.
and they're quite willing to cut each other's throats when they can. Okay, showing parallels between US foreign policy and the Duck's interactions with developing nations. Critics argued that these portrayals can produce stereotypes, blah, blah, blah. Well,
Yeah.
that was the norm at the time.
Well,
And it might become the norm again when,
yeah.
The good Marxism sails towards the horizon and sinks.
Well, I'm pretty sure you know what I'm going to say here.
A celebration of capitalist accumulation. Others see him as a satire of its successes. So, do you think it's a glorification of capitalism or a satire?
On the part of Barks, you mean?
Yeah,
I really don't imagine that Barks himself had
celebrated
had
capitalism.
an ideological intent with his comics. I think his intent was twofold: to be entertaining to the kids who are reading the comics and to be professional enough to be worth the paycheck. I mean, he wanted to make a living, but he also wanted, I'm sure he had a certain degree of appreciation for the craft of what he was doing. But I don't think he was intending to convey an ideological bias program, at least not consciously. I don't think he sat down with that intention.
Okay, there was something that came back from the publishers about his work, I recall.
But there are many thinkers who say it doesn't matter what the intent is because subconsciously It's been said that everything is propaganda for something. And I don't know if we have the patience to go into those waters. Some would say, yeah, on a subconscious level, that's exactly what he was doing. Uh,
Curiously, of course, when I
Patience
raised the issue of ethics with
doesn't
the
lend in that direction at
AI,
the moment.
it's only really got the Marxist criticism there. You know, other points of ethics haven't come up.
Hi, Carolina. Got your video on, but it's frozen because you're on the move. But welcome. Glad you're here.
Um,
Maybe the connections cutting in and out.
oh God.
Yeah, it seems to be cutting in and out, Carolina. I don't know if you're able to type, but maybe put something in the chat because your connection is cutting in and out. But if you don't know, Carolina, we're here every Friday night at this time to talk comics.
Okay, that didn't enlighten me all that much, a little bit, but I think, you know, the things perhaps like violence or something like that it isn't put there, but there was quite a violent element in there.
Yeah, back in the 80s, there was a little bit of resurgence of that whole the violence in comics is corrupting children type of thing. But there was a tiny bit of it directed towards the Karl Barks, Donald Duck, and Uncle Scrooge comics, but not by that much. They were mostly concerned with superhero comics, but it never amounted to anything, as I remember. The whole thing with rock and roll, rock lyrics, we got a lot more publicity with Frank Zappa and the other rock and roll lyrics of the 80s, corrupting children. That was big at the time. Frank Zappa testified in front of Congress
Right, yeah.
for that. Sure, sure.
Okay, 1984, 85, Zappa's 1985 congressional hearing. So after the death of the old morality, a new morality arises.
Yeah, I would say that Barks's main goal was entertainment. I think that's was primary. His primary concern was to be entertaining.
Now, well, I'll put up the comic and we'll have a look through it. Okay, share. On again.
Barks.
Okay. This was the illustration with Daisy Duck as a fortune teller.
Yeah.
I can't recall if I ever saw this one, which was looking for the lost crown of Genghis Khan.
Gang, gang, Genghis Khan. Remember that song? No, never mind.
Uh, there was a musical group called Genghis Khan. I think they're still going, actually.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, I think you're right. After all these many decades, they're still going.
Well, with new people.
Yeah,
Actually, I think one of the ladies is one of the ones almost there from the start, but you know, it's a formula group like
yeah, yeah, yeah. There were a lot of them back in the 70s. That kind of novelty group. Anyway, anyway.
I kind of like this cheap watch I bought for $1. It's ticking, sends me to sleep.
Yeah, we're past the peak, but these are still fine, good, solid, entertaining comics. Just not as good as they were, but still good.
Uncle Scrooge wouldn't feel so snug if he knew that thousands of miles away, the sandaled feet of weary runners pattering over the lofty passes of the Hindu Kush Mountains, bringing bad news. So, well, yeah,
Comic.
go on, Carolina.
I
Once
think he's
again, stories are popping about the mysterious, abominable snowman of Asia. So, what was the issues? Right, okay. One of my caravans from out of Mongolia was plodding south across the Hindu Kush Mountains. Treasure of unbelievable riches. It was the lost crown of Genghis Khan. Okay. The treasure, as usual, was placed in a guarded hiding place. Looks like somebody's grabbed. See us during the night. The crown was somehow stolen. Now, here's where it differs a bit from his earlier stories. Like, if he'd gone to a tourist place, which for the Westerner, this is a tourist place, he's going to show a lot more about it. Yeah, here he's only showing a gate. He's going through the gate. And then, you know, this point of call, he's hardly devoted anything to illustrating it, just a couple of panes at best. And then they're parachuting. Well, Yeti footprints were a big thing at some point. I forget who discovered them. Was it in the 50s? It was a bit of a news item. The watch is gone. It's been stolen. So it's a snowman. Okay, the snowman's den. And the lost crown. Well, a rather ridiculous looking figure. There's shades of in this imagery, of course. This is all shades of the Cyclops, isn't it? Yeah, he's got a cave. They get imprisoned in the cave.
Mm. Reminiscent. Yeah.
So Barks has obviously picked up on that story a little bit. I'll start the watch ticking again for help. Okay, this is the finale. You know, Fooey on the jewels. We want to hear about Goo, the abominable snowman.
Yeah.
Fooey on the crown of Genghis Khan, which is an allusion to the grave of Genghis Khan, because so the story goes that he was buried in the ground with fabulous riches,
Sure.
and the slaves that did the work were killed. Okay, the earthquakes are moving around. It's going to go down into the depths and check what the depths beneath that bird are like.
Supposedly, Genghis Khan fathered so many children that basically everybody in Asia has some amount of Genghis Khan DNA.
Yeah, well, yes, of course, you'd get a small element uh, if he produced a large number of progeny, then it's a likelihood that would be the case.
You get a report. There's never any way to prove it, but supposedly, yeah, he fathered hundreds of children. There's no way to prove that, of course, but anyway.
Okay, the mysterious coloured rocks which move around.
Now, see, this is really a good story. This is a really good story.
I can't recall if it's one I've seen. I could have.
I would put this up above the all-time greats of Karl Marx's stories. This is a really good one.
Yeah, well, certainly it's it's dealing with a very mysterious sort of world, isn't it? So they've gone into the lost world. Somehow you always tend to be able to get to the center of the earth somehow through a mine or a volcano or something like that. Welcome to terra firma. So these guys simply like creating earthquakes. Maybe it is one I've seen. I just can't recall for some reason, Paul.
Sure.
And there's entire armies of them. Apparently they eat moss.
Mhm.
Okay, duckbird suffers its earthquake. Somehow it's rumbled the labels off cans. Seems they view money as this is sort of pollution.
Right. It's paper and metal.
Okay, the guy's explaining what causes earthquakes. What do you suppose the causes of earthquakes? Well, gas builds up in the fissures and the earth shrinks. He sure ain't been around, has he, Podners? Partners. That's right. No more kids throwing snowballs. It's safe to put his top hat back on. Mush, mush. So there's always this background story that he was in the Klondike, and that's where he made his money. Dawson Calf. Yeah, egg $5, potato free, bun 2, and mush 50 cents. Can't pan for gold on this beach. And it's all a trick to get him to buy his equipment. So that's cynicism, is it?
Hmm. Hmm.
Donald Duck. Scrooge are having breakfast together. And so Donald Duck's going to read coffee grounds. Bubbles. I've never known the bubble system to fail. Well, he's reading coffee bubbles. He's the breakfast cereal gives him the title deed to 1 inch of land, 1 square inch. And wanting to fully capitalise on it, he starts buying up all the breakfast cereal he can to get all the deeds. And all he's got is a prairie dog hole. No thanks, I've kind of lost my taste for coffee. Okay, the oil that was on the gopher or the prairie dog was simply from an old tractor. So he's blown millions on the land. If you go broke, you can always make a living telling fortunes with coffee bubbles. That joke wasn't funny, Donald Duck. There's one of the wonderful silhouettes again.
Silhouette, the old classic silhouettes, yeah.
Glow worms, using glow worms to replace expensive electricity. I intend to build a new office on a vacant lot. What style will I do? Early American. I'll get a TP. It's the cheapest thing I can get.
Yeah. Here you go. Flint Heart Glomgold. Don Rose has said the classic Scrooge villains are the villains who are after one aspect of Scrooge's fortune.
One aspect.
Well, the Beagle Boys just want the money. Magica Dispel wants the smallest part of the money, just one single dime. Flint Heart Glomgold wants the status, not the money, but he wants Uncle Scrooge's status. And he
Okay.
and he pointed out the other classic villain, Acres McCovett, who wanted Scrooge's land. The classic
Acres
villains are the
McCovert.
villains that only want some one particular aspect of Scrooge's wealth. Acres McCovett wanted the land, not the money. Flintheart Glomgold wants the status of Scrooge.
Is it uh, Scrooge's status, or is it just the objective race for who climbs
Yeah, he
highest?
want well, Glomgold's goal is to be known as the richest duck slash man.
Oh well, save money on newspapers. Look around for one that's been discarded.
Right.
Mm. Well, in Australia, a newspaper now is somewhere between $3 and $5. Of course, once they used to be supported heavily because newspaper advertising was very important. And now it's a lot of reading's gone online. I'm taking a long list of everything I own down to my last million rubber trees. Why are you bringing along this ball of string, Uncle Donald, Uncle Scrooge? I need it. It's one way I can find to keep on saving things while I'm on shipboard. I don't get it. See, there's a string there, and I can wind it onto my ball. It sure is a long string, Uncle Donald. I'm going to see where the string is coming from. So he's got one of those sort of Scottish sort of hats. I don't think his name sounded Scottish. Flintheart Glomgold. Almost sounds a bit Jewish.
Supposed to be South African. Yeah.
I don't think it's bigger than mine, so he's got Glomgold's pounds bin. Who is it and what do you want? So they get the cannon pointed on them.
Yeah, he's like a mirror image of Scrooge McDuck, an alternate universe Scrooge McDuck. Hmm.
The bottom 4 feet of my money bin is full of diamonds.
Yeah,
Bottom 4 feet of my bin is full of star sapphires. So who's the richest? This is the status is important in this case.
yeah. And Barks's cartooning and character acting is still first rate.
You'll go and grab another coffee.
Sure. Just great cartooning. Just great cartooning. One of the best of all time. We're on volume 16 of the complete Karl Barks library. We do one a month. So we've been doing this for 2.5 years now. And we're halfway done. Yeah, get the whole collection, I advise. This is volume 16. Mhm. I can send it to you for free.
Uh, uh, looks a bit like the remake of The Thing when they're all tied to the chairs. I mean, it's a slightly goofy way of dealing with people, isn't it? Would it really work? Well, it works in Donald Duck comics and the remake of The Thing, if you recall that movie at all.
The Thing, no. I know the movie exists, but no, I've never seen it.
Oh, yeah, it was
I've
the original in the 1950s, which was,
yeah,
sort of a passable 50s film. And the
yeah,
remake was on, not quite as good, but on the level of Alien. You must have
sure.
seen Alien. That was a big.
I've seen Alien, yeah. I'm yeah, I've never seen The Thing, but I'm well aware of it. Yeah.
Well, it's probably an outstanding science fiction film.
Hmm.
Who did it have in it? Kurt Russell.
So many different things have parodied that movie, The Thing, over the years. Yeah, it's hard to avoid.
You know the important thing about rip-offs?
Hmm.
Make sure you rip off a good idea, not a bad one.
Makes sense. Well,
Yeah, well, of course, the interesting thing is that the thing is based on a story which, in part, was ripped off from Lovecraft.
yeah, I guess so. Yeah, sure.
So, okay, The Thing, Escape from New York, another Kurt Russell film, which
Hmm.
might be coming a reality these days.
Hmm. You're indoors.
Right, he was the one married to Goldie Hawn.
Right.
He's 75 years old, so yeah, isn't it that extraordinarily old?
I think the most. I think he was in one of those Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Marvel.
Well, that would have fitted his younger character for sure.
Hmm.
So he's playing a cameo. It's probably quite likely that in part
Hmm.
uh, the hero of Guardians of the Galaxy, sort of a Kurt Russell like character, not quite Han Solo, but more Kurt Russell. You know, a cut rate a cut rate.
You're talking about the Chris Pratt character. Yeah, but I think Kurt Russell played his dad in the next one. Yeah. With a quick cameo by David Hasselhoff.
Yeah, not quite Harrison Ford. So you know that's a cut rate. Harrison Ford as Kurt Russell.
He's also been in the Marvel movies. Mhm. Well, I think he Harrison Ford did one Marvel movie, I think, which I haven't
Now,
seen.
I assume you actually went out to the cinema to watch Guardians of the Galaxy, did you?
No, I didn't watch that one. I did
When was the last
watch,
time you went to the cinema?
as a matter of fact, I think it was one of those Spider-Man movies. That was a couple of years ago.
The audiences are getting a bit tacky these days. These superhero films, anyway.
Yeah, I think that was years back. I went to one of those Spider-Man movies. That was the last one I've been to in the theater show.
Uh, was it? I think the Ultron movies. You know, you had the what was it?
Yeah,
The Avengers or something like that.
yeah, yeah.
There was the one where he's out to reduce the population in the universe, so half the people in the universe disappear.
Yeah, I think I saw that one.
And then there was a sequel to it. Well, the the first Ultron movie,
Well, you're talking about Thanos. Ultron
yeah,
was the
Thanos, yeah.
Ultron was the robot. Thanos was the alien. Thanos, the alien.
And then the sort of the sequel to the story has all these superheroes lamenting over their lost friends, and
Mhm.
it was bore, you know, just half an hour of listening to these superheroes moan. I can't figure what gets into them when they make movies like that. You know, something's going wrong.
um, well, I think it overtook Titanic as most profitable movie of all time.
It's
Briefly,
terrifying.
I think it crossed over Titanic for a little bit. I think Titanic then overtook it again. So now Titanic's most profitable movie of all time. But very briefly, I think Avengers Endgame was most profitable. I think. Have to look that up. So a lot of people liked it. Well, saw it anyway.
Okay, well, the ego trips become extreme here. They're both so concerned about dragging out the string to the last inch. through Africa, somewhere big enough to take their line of string.
Yeah.
Yeah, I recall being rather fond of this one when I was a kid.
Yeah, this is a good one. There's a lot of great stories in the Uncle Scrooge run. You know, it's not a shame to say that's just a tiny click or two beneath the Donald Duck run, but that's not a shame. It's not a detriment. It's just a little bit beneath the Donald Duck run, but still really, really great stuff.
This is a typical colonialist view of Africa with the stampede of the
Yeah.
animals.
Yeah, as we've said before, definitely Carl Barks had a National Geographic subscription. Back when magazines existed.
Well, it's the rhino's horn has a use after all.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember this where they're testing out the string to the last bit. That still equal.
Yeah.
He still has a bit more string.
I mean, the whole thing is ludicrous. I mean, it's impossible to take this seriously, but it's just so charming. It's just such a delightful, charming approach to the craft of just really good, solid, entertaining comics. Just puts a smile on your face.
Okay, I'll give you $1 to chisel my bust. $1. I am in salt. You are a greater chiseler than I, cheapskate.
Sure.
It's an idea. Well, he's fallen in the mud. He's got a mold. He makes a bust of himself. I don't think I'm going to pay $5 for a seat. So I think now American workers are fairly highly paid in the 50s. Let's say in Australia, a week's wage might be $14. So $5 at the time was probably more than a day's pay for a workman. And Scrooge ends up being inside the kettle drum. There he is, he's looking at his success. Who does this remind you of? As that moment, he's worked all those years to build his world. So who is he here? What classic story that we talk about a lot?
I think you're talking about Faust.
Yeah, the Faust moment when he looks on all his works and
Yeah.
feels that sudden elevation of happiness, which he promised never to be satisfied.
Yeah.
And he's reached the moment of satisfaction, which is his doom.
Yep. 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 Yep.
They decide to put a roadway through his money bin. No choice, he has to move, finds himself a delicious valley. Doggone if I don't like this place. It'll be pleasant to live out my life here among the daisies. I see a surveying crew. Oh, we're going to build a dam here. Force a move again, so he sticks his money bin on top of a peak, which then is in the way of a rocket sled, which was a concept used in When Worlds Collide, if you remember that film. When Worlds Collide.
No, I haven't seen that one either.
Uh, they seem to be a rather big budget, very, very stylish science fiction film. Yeah, yeah, you had a lot of very cheap science fiction films, and some of them were rather successful. When Worlds Collide
Mhm.
uh, was, yeah, big budget, very impressive. It's in the Rocky Horror song. When worlds collide, George Pell said to his bride, I'll give you some terrible thrills.
Hmm.
I think that's the line, isn't it? Just trying to think. Was that a George Pell movie? When worlds collide, said George Pell to his bride, I'm going to give you some terrible thrills. The lyric refers to the Oscar-winning 1951 science fiction film When Worlds Collide, which was produced by the legendary Hungarian-American filmmaker and animator George Pell. Pell is highly regarded for pioneering stop-motion animation and producing iconic science fiction films of the 50s and 60s, Destination Moon and The Time Machine. It's actually, I think, amongst science fiction films, it's not so much great, although there is a certain greatness about it, as in it's a little bit different. The story is they discover that there's a rogue sun that's going to swallow Earth. It's on the way to Earth. And so
Hmm.
they discover around the sun is an Earth-like planet, which they're not absolutely sure about. But they build a rocket ship as an ark to take surviving humanity, just in case the new planet is habitable, for human civilization to survive. And they build this big sort of rocket sled, like in this illustration, and I think goes down like a roller coaster, and then the rocket flies up into the heavens, which is, of course, nonsense as far as physics is concerned. But
Yeah.
yes, it's a lot. You mean I've got to move my money bin because it's in the way of a rocket mail line? Yes, the latest wonder of the age. Okay, that's it. It's just going to have a permanently mobile money bin.
Yeah.
If you break it, you bought it. And you just smash a small china. This tenant hasn't paid me in months. It's a hypnotist. He's going to hypnotise people to take them back to their past lives. And pointing out his successes here. This must have been, yeah, something that was showing up in the 50s, and this idea of hypnotising people in the former incarnations. Uh, Big theme in a 60s film. On a clear day, you can see forever.
Mhm.
That's right. It's a hypnotist. I think it was with Barbara Streisand. Okay, on a clear day, you can see forever. I had Jack Nicholson in it. 1970 musical romance.
Hmm.
Yeah, the hypnotist falls in love with Barbara Streisand and he wants to pursue a romance. And at the end of the film, that fails. But he discovers in a future life they live together. I can see where hypnotism might do me some good. Perhaps long ago I was keeper of King Solomon's lost mines. Nice little helmet. Or maybe I was a guard at the treasure urns of the palace of King Croesus. Hope I pronounced that right.
Oh, don't go in that direction, Stephen.
Or King Croesus was a name, was the name they had for the last king of Lydia,
Mhm.
the nation that invented coinage.
There's a YouTube guy who has these interesting trivia questions. Like, what was the country that invented democracy? Questions like that. It's never the one, never what you think it is. The answer is hard to guess. Interesting.
Well, I think democracy of a form was probably always there, the idea of having a vote
Hmm.
on the outcome, but formally, I suppose, properly speaking, the first democracy that's known of was Athens,
Yeah, I
or
did.
but it was actually the Roman Republic preceded it by 1 year. The Roman Republic appeared in 509 BC, and the Athenian democracy appeared in 508 BC.
Right, 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 right.
Okay, for the $90, you'll get 9 minutes of the rusty past, $10 a minute. Yet, that's the union scale for this type of hypnotism. So, this is sort of rather romantic illustration, which you've always wanted to be a pirate. So Scrooge is and Donald are pirates
Yeah.
under Elizabeth I. To the Queen, long live the Queen. Okay, I'm off to the Spanish Main, and so is Donald. They shared a previous life together.
Yeah.
The Falcon Rover, the ship was lost. Oh, this is still rather nice here. This is his whole adventure scheme. He's putting in a bit of detail. Look how many pains
Yeah.
he's devoted to the boat sailing across the ocean. Quite a bit of devotion to the plane trip.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's a nice scene, a stormy Caribbean.
Yep. As we've always said, Karl Barks can certainly be very evocative in his portraits of these foreign climes.
I'd like to rent your boat. The boat's destroyed. Still a deal? You ask the dumbest questions. And so a kid-size galleon, which appeals to the imagination of a kid, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I remember reading these and just thinking, yeah, how is it possible for these for this family to have so many adventures and go to these different places? I've never even been out of America.
Well, it is. It did become easy because, well, for example, airplane travel. Of course, it was very expensive once. Now it's relatively cheap.
Yeah,
You could possibly even, get the money together, uh,
sure.
to go on. Yeah, if you pick the right sort of ticket, I think there are tickets which are ultra cheap, but they come with a lot of conditions. Like you might get bumped, which might not matter if you've got a lot of time on your hand.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. It'll never
That's
happen.
right. You were doing something online, weren't you? You ran that we were trying to get your prove your identity. So you're sort of trying to run an online business of some kind.
Well, I was getting my driver's license renewed,
Yeah, that was it.
yeah, I got it. Yeah. I guess the next step now, I guess I could get my passport, but maybe I'll get around to doing that. Maybe, probably not, but we never know.
Okay. They made a promise to each other in their former life to share the treasure equally. What do they find in it? The remains of potatoes. That was the treasure in the
Yeah,
16th century, which is true if you were the one person that had a potato in the 16th century, you had a gold mine.
yeah,
Okay, his soil's too poor. He needs some minerals, so he throws some coinage in there, plenty of minerals.
sure.
There's oil everywhere, so he's replacing his fuel bills with oil that he's gotten out of his own land. Yeah, it's a strange sight. I was talking to a guy. He went to California, and you wander along and you'll see oil rigs in the middle of nowhere. And just here, there, all over the place, pumping oil. I assume that's a common sight for you.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Kind of depends on where you go, but yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah. I've been around as long as I've been here, which is my whole life. So yeah, sure. Took a while, long time before I realized what they actually were, but yeah, I'd seen them.
Oh, he's viewing the Rocky Peak again, so the natural wonder. Back over there, I thought this was a dime. I thought it was a quarter.
I never imagined him talking with a Scottish accent in my head whenever I read him talking. It never seems
That
any.
was in the film versions, was it?
Well, yeah, they did have the Scottish accent when they did him in a cartoon, that's right. But when I read the comics, I never imagine him talking in a Scottish accent.
And in the
Okay, he's going to see some easy money for contestants. So they've lined up at the door. He's sleeping in front. He gets a stint, comes back, and then he gets warned that if he earns any more money, he'll go into a higher tax bracket. Back in the 50s, there were very high tax brackets. I think it was up to 90% in some cases. Of course, there was all ways around that. If you invested your money in the right way, you could get out of it. Of course, it limited what you could do with your money. Ronald Reagan famously campaigned on reducing income taxes. Oh, there's the wearing a hole in the carpet moment. That was used a few times. Quiet worry room. Donald's peddling pillows. Very well. The first question for 20,000. What is the shape of a round coin? I don't know. The second question for $20,000. What is the colour of the back of a greenback? I don't know. Third question, what metal is used to make silver dollars? I don't know. Give that duck a dunce cap. Where did you find him? On a totem pole? Send him back to kindergarten. How dumb can they get? What president's portrait is on the Lincoln penny? I don't know. Now the last question. What date is stamped on this year's coins? I don't know. This contestant is so outlandishly ignorant he doesn't win one $20,000 prize tonight. You must hear the Colossus surprise.
Okay.
Mr. McDuck, for being the most stupid, the most blockheaded, ignorant dolt ever to appear on television, we present you with our Colossus surprise prize of $120,000. The other is to get even with you for the $1 billion worth of bum advice. Cold bargain. Okay, right. This is this rare element.
Yeah.
And the guy from us looks suspiciously Eastern European. Comes along and says, I want it for my country. It's this bit where it's, kept in ice. And if the ice melts, then it turns to a gas.
Mm-hmm.
And it's cake of scraping to do some tests. And he's back on the ocean again. So the nephews are going to get up to mischief and make a copy, an orange cake copy or something like that. Then the submarine shows up, nice illustration of a submarine. He wants to grab the rare element. he gives him the fake one. They discover that one atom put into a formula will produce a great load of ice cream, and you can have various flavors. So that's its value. So he's offered $2 trillion by the ice cream companies. He's got the penguin who thinks it's an egg. When he finds out it's seemingly not good for much, he's happy to destroy the information which has the whereabouts. $1, I bid $1 for a penguin egg. So he's sending penguin eggs to the penguin. Short with the Beagle brothers.
Hmm.
The secret of my billions. There's nothing but blank pages. Naturally, if I told you anything, it wouldn't be a secret.
Um,
Want to buy a home far out in the wilds. Looks like Canada. Right in the region north of Lake Superior, vast blocks of public land. Okay, a fake moose. Okay, that's a rather cute image. So you got the Indians with all you can see of their feathers. Look like a load of Smurfs. Maybe the Smurfs ripped him off. We must trick the pale duck warriors. We must bring them to our council. There to test their good intentions and ask what they are planning. Make them fish for the king sturgeon. That will prove if they are worthy. Should they land the great king sturgeon, then we smoke them Indian style. I can talk to the animals. He's talking to a wildcat. The wildcat loosens his bonds and he escapes. The fish listen to the Indians and then scare the ducks out of the water.
hmm.
Okay, the great sturgeon. A lot of rare earths, which is rather topical at the moment.
Sure.
This is a case of China's mercantilism, that it was producing the rare earths uh, and undercutting the other producers around the world till the point where it took over the market. And suddenly they woke up to the consequences of China taking over the market when China turned militaristic around 2012.
Hmm.
And so Trump has come across as a great anti-China warrior. So that was to smoke him. They made him smoke the peace pipe that was full of such crazy stuff in it that he couldn't stand the taste. It was so I was happy to go back to industrialised duckbird. No, it's a rather silly one. No, okay, the must be reminiscing back into the 1890s or early 1900s when he was running a riverboat. So he's
Crashing.
racing with the Beagle brothers.
Yeah. Gyro's grandfather.
So they got to pick up some gold, damaging the steam engine. So he changes it to a diesel or oil burner. Pouring molasses out the back, which uh, sort of sticks up the pedal wheel. That's how Gyro always got his great moments of thought, was hitting his head with a hammer. It's the idea of a propeller blade, which defeats the purpose, because they didn't use the propellers on rivers because they'd get snagged and the water wasn't deep enough. Tearing past, gets hit by a twister, and gets so disorientated he goes back to where he started, but the twister's also taken the bank with the gold to where he started.
Yeah.
So he still gets to deliver the gold. Or a hat, okay, the vagaries of the top hat, can have something cool in it or something warm.
And that's
There's a wonderful capitalist image there, the love of money.
volume down.
All right, early in 1956, Bernstein published The Search for Bridie Murphy, which quickly became a bestseller and sparked a hypnotism fad that grew into include movie songs, the popular dance, and a cocktail, the reincarnation. Yeah, I remember watching a movie based on the book back in the 1960s.
Hmm.
And the illustration with Daisy Duck as a fortune teller, but originally had a dog face as a fortune teller. Money grows on trees.
More volume down. We're we're
And I'll
we're
see how
past
much further I want to go.
we're past the halfway mark. If we go all the way, we're past halfway. We've
Yeah, I
done
have. Yeah, well, you see them in the
16 months.
shops. There's a local comic book shop. There might be a few in Melbourne, but there's a big one in a particular place I used to live in. I walked in one day and they had the Donald Duck volumes in there.
Yeah. Um,
All right, Carolina. I was saying that as a child, I used to love reading these comics, and yet the logic of a child is very different from that of the adult making them.
yeah. We've been at this 16 months and we're past halfway. Started in February of last year.
How is
Yes, Carolina.
Yeah, like audio is cutting in and out.
Bark's main goal. Oh, right, she's having trouble with her audio.
Maybe.
The colours are so vibrant, all handmade too. The publisher made it a point to be faithful to the original colours. Genghis Khan. The Comics Journal's top 100 comics of the 20th century list Karl Barks comics were number 7, and Uncle Scrooge stories were number 20. The Lightbug story reminds me of my brother, who I wouldn't put it past him to save money on electricity. Scrooge is relatable like that. Hence, still relatable across generations. Sure, Barks stories are timeless classics. Barks definitely takes one of the places on the Mount Rushmore of comics creators. Great cartooning indeed. Okay, my audio was spotty.
Although we're not here next week, we'll meet a few days after our usual time next week.
Oh, that's right. We're doing the what is it? The Morning after
the
the Kenneth
link.
Smith group, is it?
Before. The two links at the top of the chat will get you. The meeting for next week will be 2 days after our usual time and 1 day before that week's Rick meeting. Okay, let me get that for you.
You
Oh, okay, Kingdom. Right.
Seattle, Washington.
The adventure anime.
Carolina is in Seattle, Washington. Oh, Portland, Oregon. It says Seattle on your profile. That's cool. Yeah, it does.
Okay, so the meeting. So you've got your movie nights next week, and it's going to be after that, or
The meeting next week, it'll be well, if you got the book Kingdom, so it'll be really 24 hours before that week's Rick meeting. And yeah, about 42 hours after our usual time. That makes sense. If you look on the calendar, it'll be, well, I could show you, but
oh,
it'll,
there it is, right, Kingdom.
yeah, that's right. You got it. That's it. So that'll be next week.
Okay, that'll be on my Monday at 7 a.m.
Looks like it, yeah. And
Okay, back to the Kobayashi Maru. Rick's outlook on that amazed me.
well, well, depending on how deep we're going to go, I always wonder, where's any of this going to go? And I already know the answer. It's not going to go anywhere at all. So I don't even need to ask that. But he did get something wrong, and I'm kind of debating whether or not to make a big deal about it. I probably won't because again, it doesn't matter. Who cares? But he did get something wrong in the last one. But anyway, I don't suppose it matters.
Well, it's probably a question. I think in my era has been too direct. It doesn't pay to push an idea too much.
Hmm.
It's better to be subtle about it.
Depends on what you're trying to accomplish, I always say. I think people get involved in conversations where they just don't know what it is they're trying to accomplish. Are you trying to convince somebody or are you trying to just communicate something? I think a lot of people are just want to talk for the sake of talking. They just want somebody to listen to them.
Well, certainly there's a point to talking that you're exercising a whole load of things. For example, if you spent a long time in conversation with people, you're exercising your lungs, which is beneficial. Maybe there's a downside to being too silent and you're not
Well,
exercising your lungs.
well, sure. I'm just saying I don't think people really analyze what it is their goal is in conversation. Like, are you trying to convince somebody? Because chances are you're not going to. But but here's my point. If you were going to try to convince somebody, if that's truly your goal, then I would say that people could be doing a heck of a lot better job of it than they do. But that's why they do such a poor job is exactly for that reason, because they don't know what their goal is in the conversation. If they were clearer about that, then they would be more effective. You see what I'm saying? Be clearer about what your goal is in the conversation and use that as a starting point, and then you'll be more effective in accomplishing your goal. I don't think people think it through. What am I trying to accomplish in this conversation?
So
You
which
did
guru?
that, you'd be more effective.
So which guru did you pick up this one from? Yeah, I'm not the brightest around. I'm not entirely dumb, of course, but there's a lot of people on Zoom
No,
that
in it's called skillful means. It's called skillful means. It's like you don't give calculus to grade schoolers. You start off with arithmetic, and then you keep going up until you get to calculus. But that's called skillful means. If you're a skillful teacher, you're gonna present the material in a way that your audience is going to be able to accept it. But people don't do that. People just give it out to anybody, and that doesn't help anybody. That doesn't do anything. You're not going to get anybody to where you want them to be. If you're a good educator, Nietzsche's great educator, then you know what you're doing every step of the way. You lead people step by step by step, and sometimes that takes years. And you've heard me say this before, that people don't have the patience for that. It sometimes it does. It takes years for those steps to take place. But nobody has the patience for it. People just want to say what they want to say and it's just like there's no communication. There's no communication because everybody's talking past each other. They have their talking points, whatever it happens to be. You know exactly what I'm talking about because that's all these philosophy meetings are. It's just people talking past each other because nobody wants to sit down and work through step by step by step because that takes time and nobody wants to take the time. They just want to be heard, whatever their particular hobby horse is. But we've talked about this before. It's why I don't go to the philosophy meetings anymore. One of the reasons.
I do perceive there is a great problem. I've always termed it that everyone's pushing their own wheelbarrow. They're all like hawkers for what they've got for sale, and they're just wandering around seeing anybody will buy their story.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. People aren't clear about what their goal is in a conversation. I think most people just want somebody to listen to them. They just want somebody to listen to them because they don't have the goal of actually convincing someone. Because if you had that goal, you'd be going about it a lot differently. If I wanted to convince you of my, which I don't, but I'd be talking to you a lot differently. But I don't have that goal.
Yeah, well, I've always wondered about the Kobe-Mashi Maru. And of course, the interesting thing is you have it introduced in the Wrath of Khan. And then you get all the crazy fans who love the stuff, everything Star Trek. I mean, of course, I came from a time when Star Trek was popular with the kids, but the older generation preferred Bonanza. And now Bonanza's pretty much, well, there's still a little bit of fandom for Bonanza, but now everything's Star Trek.
Yeah. Well, well, if you ever watch YouTube reactor videos, that means if we're talking young kids, anybody below the age of 30 or 32, they're just learning about all of it for the first time. They haven't seen all the old classics, and they're just watching them now for the first time. All of them, Star Trek, Star Wars, all of them, because they're young. They haven't watched stuff from the 20th century.
Yeah, I recall in the late 80s, I was wanted to watch the shoestring budget British Star Trek, which was called Blake Seven. And that has quite a fandom following, even though it was produced cheap.
Yeah.
Like, say, its quality level was that of a Tom Baker Doctor Who.
Yeah.
I wasn't a great fan of Tom Baker, but probably my favourite Doctor Who story is a Tom Baker where you have the genesis of the Daleks. They introduced Davros and all that. But you see the imitations. The Daleks were originally Nazis.
Yeah.
Fighting another side, who maybe they were the Americans or maybe they were Russians. We're not quite sure. And because they're going to all turn into mutants, they decide, well, this is how we're going to keep our culture going. But I mean, Davros, and you know the Davros character, don't you?
You remember, yeah. Yeah.
Well, who's he based on? Obviously a mad scientist, that's a trope, but it's a specific mad scientist.
No, I don't know.
Dr. Strangelove. Dr.
Oh.
Strangelove is confined to a wheelchair.
Oh, okay, okay.
Dr. Strangelove is the ex-Nazi now working for America. He's now a good American, but the Nazis always screaming to get out, when he finally, Mein Führer, I can walk.
Yeah. I think Kubrick was drawing on Werner von Braun.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's it wasn't. There would have been a few of them though, so you can't be absolutely sure which one he was drawing on. But as a collective group, yeah. And of course, his master plan at the end, that this is what Dr. Strangelove lives for. We can all use the mind tunnels and we'll create a perfect society with about 10 women to each man. I know, of course, this represents a great moral sacrifice, but it's necessary for the survival of the human race. And of course, this was an era when sex was the big sell. Things changed in the 1980s. 1980s, it went from sex to status. Sex was a product of the era of romance. Basically, Donald Duck's era is still a romantic period. And we've bypassed romance. we've become much more postmodern. We we've become skeptical about romance.
Mm.
Postmodern era is a period which has become skeptical about the modernist initiatives.
I remember talking to somebody about her her kid. I've never been a parent, but I have no idea what I would say to anybody who's 16 years old right now. I mean, the world just seems so confused and topsy-turvy and upside down. I don't know what I would tell anybody who's 16 years old right now. What's going on? I wouldn't know. Because
Well, the
what is
question
going
is,
on?
isn't it, is what to value? And not all values are moral uh, in the normal sense of the word. Not all values concern what's ethical, but what we value is what we pursue as well, and what we think is important.
Well, as we've talked about before, it seems to me that we've gone in a U-turn. We've regressed. And just recently, just in the last 25 years, we've talked about this before. It's been very recent. Seemed to me we were going in the right direction. Seemed to me. But about, yeah, 25 years ago, it just sort of took a U-turn. Seems to me.
Oh, okay.
And
What was it?
when I say the right direction, I mean in an up direction, in an upward direction. That's what I mean by right.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be the great mystic and go with Spengler that he said that when the modern age began, there was a religious devotion to the new knowledge, and this is Spengler's point, that religious devotion to the new knowledge itself isn't rational, but it's tremendous drive. He said what eventually comes after a few centuries is people become skeptical about the new knowledge. So Spengler was on the pulse of postmodernism straight away. He was like a bloodhound. He snipped it out just as it was
Yeah.
appearing.
Yeah. Well, that's what Kenneth Smith has always been saying about, but no, he points out his big four: Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, Marx, and Hegel. As far as I'm aware, I don't think Smith has ever mentioned Spengler. Oh no, he has a few times, I think. Thought you were talking about Schelling. No, Spengler. Yeah, different. Okay. No, he knows Spengler.
Yeah,
Definitely
of
does.
course he would know of Spengler. Well, I didn't know of Spengler until a few years ago. It was Metalia, which sort of
Really?
introduced me to Spengler. Yeah.
Really? I didn't know that. Okay. No, I read that book yeah, about 30 years ago.
Well,
No,
she's
that's
got
an important book. It's an important book. Everybody should read that one, yeah. Kenneth
this
has it on his list.
this is Natalia, right? She has a dream that she meets Adolf Hitler. It was quite a vivid dream, it seems. And she was absolutely thrilled by it. And she sticks it on YouTube and tells everybody about how she had this dream where she met the Fuhrer. And I said, don't put that on YouTube. Take it down. It's not a wise move. But she's obsessed with it for a while. She eventually did take it. I just kept on telling her that, you know, your love of Hitler is something you tell your close friends. You don't tell the world.
Uh, okay. You mean the Metalia you're dreaming of in the dream? I hope
No,
not.
this is Metalia. Metalia had a dream that she met Adolf Hitler, and she was thrilled to bits.
Okay.
I
Sure.
see. This is a Asian fandom. You've seen that. The Asians like dressing up as Nazis, and
Yeah, it's like But recently with Kanye, with the thing about Kanye recently.
I
No.
have heard the name. Who's he? Is he a music star or something?
Yes, go to Google Kanye Nazi.
All right.
Kanye Nazi.
Well, see, for the Asians, it's not personal. For them,
No,
it
he
looks
just
romantic and entertaining.
yeah. Well,
The
in his
Japanese are personal for Asians. They fly in the fits. You know, if you mention the Japanese or the Chinese, there's that huge, gigantic grudge there.
you see, it's like what I keep saying. How do you even begin to talk about this? Where do you even start? The conversation is just so confused right off the bat. It's such a snake pit to even start to talk about this stuff because it takes time to really talk about this, and no one has the time, no one has the patience. It's impossible. It's impossible to have a conversation about any of this stuff.
Yeah, I love somebody was saying it was Heidegger's condemnation of Nietzsche and Spengler. And the guy was writing said, well, you look at what uh, Heidegger was saying, he was virtually calling Nietzsche and Spengler dumb and dumber. I mean, of course, you look at Nietzsche, what Nietzsche's, work is thoroughly continental. It's completely romantic. Uh, and of course, you look at his whole path of development. Uh,
Hmm.
he went from being an idealist. He went through the whole phase of modern man as a person. He went from having grandiose ideas, idealisms. He becomes an atheist, but he can still have an enthusiasm for the atheist path of knowledge. But then he's a bit of a Nazi. He's following Wagner, and he gets sick of that. And then he becomes thoroughly postmodern. He starts rationally tearing at all the values. And by values, I mean values which aren't facts. We can all agree on what the facts are, but different cultures, different people can have different values because they're not rooted in anything really objective.
Um, it would be really good to have a conversation about values, but as I keep saying, it's almost impossible. But it would be a very valuable conversation to have. Yes.
Yeah, well, Spengler was a huge disciple of Nietzsche, and he makes some relevant points. It's very much that Spengler's work has its roots in Goethe, which is channeled by Nietzsche, and he points out that the analytics think that the only thing that matters is the knowledge,
Hmm. whereas
Nietzsche and Spengler point out that the observer is critical. We are we're the equipment that observes. So the human element matters.
But
Or you'll have no telescope. Your binoculars will become disenchanted, grow legs, and walk away from you. That's the humanity. Okay, Kanye's a rapper.
We have a list of quotes, and half of them were said by Kanye West, and half of them were said by Hitler.
Okay, I think I vaguely remember something. Just don't remember it that well.
well, in his case, in his case, it turned out, yeah, he's very, very bipolar. But so I don't know. When you're talking about people who talk about admiring Hitler or anything, you always have to wonder, what are they serious or not? But then you go, well, there must be some kind of brain chemistry thing going wrong or something. You never know. So, but some people might be serious, in which case you go, well, then you're talking about a completely different phenomenon. So, what do you do?
Yeah, well, Spengler met Hitler. Hitler was a great fan of his work. Spengler's comments are most interesting as somebody who had met Hitler when he was getting towards the height of his power. Spengler described Hitler as a wild fantasizer.
Yeah.
And then he went on to call him a nincompoop. I'm not sure about nincompoop. You sort of think, well, Hitler might be evil, but he was pretty smart. But
Well,
Spengler's disagreements with Hitler were over the fate of the Russians, because for in Spengler's system, the Germans have reached their height and are now in decline, even though there'll be still a greatness in their decline. But the new hope for humanity in Spengler's system is the Russians. They'll be the new culture that rises in the century to come, which he wasn't the only one to claim that. He had Soloviev. Rudolf Steiner made similar claims. I think Philosophy might have said something along those lines. But right now, the Russians are barbarians, like the Franks. Modern Western civilization began with the Franks, who were barbarians. You had the story of the knights, who were actually just savage barbarians going out on journeys to discover the Holy Grail. And in the process, they become more civilized. That's the bud. The high Middle Ages, when we see all the grand cathedrals, we see the heights of Christianity, is the blossom. That was Western civilization was at its most beautiful in the high Middle Ages. And then you have the fruits, that whole period when the Westerners spread across the world, spreading their technology. The fruit is the technology. And Spengler says, well, we're entering the time, the tombstone of Western civilization, when it will look big and good, but the vitality has been lost. And he said that's when in the West, when you see a Caesar figure arise, and the great nation is America, that's the new power in the world in his time.
well, that's the most.
Now, the interesting thing, he says at the same time the Caesar figure appears, will come a new religious revival, which won't last in the long run. So what are you seeing? Christian nationalism. You're seeing a Caesar figure in Donald Trump. You've got to remember that as the Roman Republic decayed, there was a whole host of demagogues who all wanted to be the emperor, but variously they'd either die or were assassinated. And the gargantuan one at the end was Julius Caesar, who fails to take politics seriously enough, but his nephew Augustus learns and very carefully knows how to play to people's whims in the way Caesar didn't. They talk about the grey genius of Augustus Caesar. But what had happened in the Roman Republic? They split into two halves and they fought each other with the various demagogues containing power. And it seems to be that you basically had a centrifugal effect that, once the Roman Empire had established itself, everybody was going in their own direction. There was no longer a common cause, even though it was immensely powerful. So what's happened to America now? all the different groups see America as their particular pedestal. And you'll end up with a tyrannical ruler, because as bad as tyrants are, at least they've got a consistent message in one person. But, you know, if America follows that path, it's about a century of chaos will ensue. And during that chaos, world trade will suffer. Because people can't agree on anything. One thing, we all thought that world trade was the gods in the 1980s and 90s. And then we discovered, no, it's what we saw with the two old ducks. It's status, aggrandizement can override the delight in material things, and much of the delight in material things is self-aggrandizement, isn't it? So does the ego win? Yeah, I looked at the first Kobayashi Maru story, and that just has certain elements. It's a test for something. And I would say, and it didn't really explicitly lay it out, but you know, Lieutenant What's-Her-Face is stuck with that scenario. There's she gets a message from a ship in the forbidden or whatever, neutral zone. An armed ship's not supposed to enter into it. She goes, hell, it's got a few hundred passengers on it. She goes in, and it's a trap. The Klingons are there. We don't know if the ship, it doesn't explicitly point out whether the ship was real or not. It sounds like that was just the bait. There was no real ship there. That was just the bait that the Klingons had laid. But then you see later versions of it where they've lost the basic strategy there. This is a warning in wargaming. You get that you've got to beware trying to rescue losses, and in which results in the loss of everything, a total loss. It's better to, you know, save half your forces than lose a lot. Okay, you've potentially lost a cruise ship with passengers on it, which has value, but you're not even sure if it's real. You can't be sure at start. You could have given it more time. Okay, she could have just kept a ship there, continued taking messages from the ship to work out, you know, is this for real? This ship says it's doomed. We need your help straight away. You know, in classic military strategy, preserving your own vessel was sort of almost the prime directive. But in later versions, you know, the totally ridiculous later version where you've got the young Kirk being a total ass, reprogramming the thing. We find out it was Spock who created the scenario, the young Spock. But it seems a bit ridiculous, and there were other versions of it. But, you know, the classic hero trope is you have to have the 100%. You can't lose anybody. Everyone must be saved. There must be a happy ending, which is great in fiction, but not in reality. In reality, it's not always a happy ending. Much of the time it isn't. And so that the classic strategy is, in that situation, you're not going to let sentiment overrule you know, your most sensible evaluations. Or you're going to have to look for alternatives. Maybe an alternative is you sit there and keep on taking messages and trying to determine if there's another way or if it's real. But it seems the current generation thinks that they have to have 100%. The current generation, and Rick's not that much younger than me, is he? He's only about 6 years younger than me, is very idealistic. Hasn't learnt the message of tragedy. You know, there's this Nietzsche. What's his first great book? The Birth of Tragedy. Apocalypse Now, you watch the movie, which is based on Comrade's story.
Right.
What do they say to the Marlowe in the movie? You see, son, good does not always triumph over evil. And sometimes the lesser angels take over a man's nature, or this is what Marlowe is told at the start of Apocalypse Now. Okay, nice to see you, Carolina.
Yeah.
Catch you another time.
Thanks for being here.
Let's see, McIntyre's most enduring contribution after virtue. The moral schizophrenia of the West. What do you think has been lost in a lot of this stuff? What are people missing? You know, you've just presented something here and it talks about the moral decline of the West. And it's making a good point, probably. What does the humanity miss? I'm not talking about the guy that wrote this. But what is humanity missing?
Well, isn't that what we've been talking about for the last 6 years, Stephen? I've said before, you know, it's pretty depressing when your team has been on a 2,000-year losing streak. We've been exterminating the Aristoi and done a very good job of it.
I don't know if I take that story fully. I think there's certainly a point that the modern world doesn't understand how important the Aristoi were. These were the people that were trained to see the greater tragedies, to see the pitfalls, to see the potential path above the pitfalls. And yes, certainly in current civilization, there's not a great respect because our civilization wants to hear the musical, wants to hear the happy story that only depends on your own, you know, the ideal is your own efforts in a way that and it's a minimalist effort. I can get there, I'll just, you know, I'll have the good attitude and that'll get me there. Well, the good attitude's not enough because you're going to strike difficulties. Will your good attitude be good enough to overcome the difficulties? And the Aristos was trained in that thing, like as at the beginning of Apocalypse Now, that there is the dark side. That good doesn't always triumph over evil. You have to be wary. Good intentions can become bad intentions. The path to hell is paved with good intentions. What I pick up, yeah, it's this what do you call it? The Russellian theme that human nature is basically good. The medieval Christians were even smarter than that. They always knew the devil was there by their side. This is Goethe. What does he say? The good people never sent the devil, even though he has them by the collar. You know, Jung warns people to be wary of their shadow. This is lost on modern people. They
Isn't that
they don't suspect their own motives. Nietzsche's full of this. Nietzsche suspects, what are my real motives? Is my civilization a pretense? Is underneath it all the savage beast? That was a question that used to be asked. but it's not really being asked so much anymore. It's the idea that the external world's the goal, which the external world is important, but there's also the internal world. And the internal world is perceived in excessively general terms. They don't really pay attention. They like the internal world. The internal world's great, but they don't really pay attention to the pitfalls. Rudolf Steiner warned about this weird thing. Rudolf Steiner, the nutcase, he was a worthwhile lightweight philosopher in the 1890s before he became a theosophist. He was a great devotee of Max Stirner and anarchism. He actually said he preferred Max Stirner to Nietzsche, even though he was a Nietzsche scholar. And he warns there's two types of devils. There's the devils you find internally inside yourself, but there's a different set of devils in the externals, and you need to be wary of both. If you ever one-sidedly think that this is the way to go, look behind you. And people will be either overly absorbed into the internal or overly involved in the external. Two different types of demon are living in those worlds, was his message. But the church, of course, only really thought of one type of demon. It didn't. He said the church was unable to differentiate between the two types of demon. And so somebody like Trump, for example, has his good points and his bad points. And Trump, in his ego aggrandizement, of course, and he's under an enormous amount of pressure, can easily succumb to his bad points. So, you know, Trump's big weakness is self-aggrandizement. Because, you know, he was a boy from Queens that American, you know, the upper class of America sort of, you know, looked at him as something common. And he thought, well, I'm going to show you lot. But this is a huge problem with modern people, is that they can't see the pitfalls. They think everything's a happy scenario. You know, well, the Cubby and Marshy Maru was there to teach you that there can be a sad ending waiting for you. And you need to be cautious.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Toxic
Yeah.
positivity.
Oh, that's right. This is how they change it in the later stories. In the later stories, the ship is ordered to go and rescue the ship, which wasn't in the original story. It wasn't an order. They just suddenly discovered this warning message. You know, this is a war game strategy. You know, don't get sucked in by the cheese. Don't fall for the trap. It doesn't matter if you lose a battle, as long as you don't lose it too badly. Existing, if you continue to exist, you're still a threat to your enemy, even if you've lost a battle. So it's smarter not to overcommit yourself in many cases, you know, to cut your losses and run. You know, when you buy shares, you know, if you're in the market, you have to be very careful about sentiment influencing, you know. It's like you with your business venture. Your biggest enemy is sentiment. You have to look at everything in a very cold, calculated way to see the possibilities. You can't be too much of the enthusiast. The external world has its own mousetrap, and the internal world has its mousetrap. Yeah, well, the modern world wants a safe scenario. It wants an easy ride. It doesn't want any dangers. And oddly enough, doesn't see the dangers. It doesn't realise that even in the supposed safe ride, there are dangers. Because danger will come to you. You can choose a place of safety, but then danger will come to you. Sometimes a place of safety can work out a lot. Anonymity is generally a safe space.
Hmm.
And it used to be a very safe space, but even that is getting dangerous today because it's a far more, let we say, as a world that is willing to toss aside the rules now. And this is what you'll see in international politics, that the rules will be tossed aside. We'll be reaching new nasties. And we've already seen it. We saw it with the Nazis and the Marxists in the early 20th century. The old aristocratic orders had a certain set of rules about how they played the game. And when the aristocracies fell, it was replaced by commoners who were not raised in the aristocratic niceties. So yeah, that was the loss of the aristocratic, or the aristocrats in part destroyed themselves. They ceased to be have the true spirit of aristocracy, which meant that to grow, they had to face challenges. But the aristocrats just became a wealthy elite who were devoted to luxury and comfort, which was not the original way aristocrats were raised. They were raised to face danger, to face the harsh questions. And they were specialists because the vast majority of people don't want responsibility and don't want to think up a path for themselves. They would rather somebody else take the responsibility and somebody else give the orders. So it's just the rare individual who sacrifices his own sense of internal comfort. Because this is a thing, if you grow into the aristocrat's role, your sense of internal comfort is challenged. You'll never feel that same sense of internal comfort the aesthetic had. There I am, I'm wrapped up with my favourite comic on a rainy Saturday afternoon, and I'm in seventh heaven, floating for a while. That's the aesthetic. Of course, the downside is the despair when you're not having the highs you had on that rainy Saturday afternoon. Taking responsibility in life is a way of filling up your time. But above that, we're getting more and more to what could be described as the aristocratic. That's more than just taking responsibility. It's developing the sense of direction for yourself and others, a true role of leadership. Oh, well. Oh, okay. Yeah, I suppose that wraps it up for today. We've gone over time.
Okay, so the RIC meeting should be the same place. And then Kingdom, which will be 40 hours after our usual time, but 20 hours before Rick's meeting next week. that makes sense, but it's on the calendar. So, okay.
Well, we live in an age that says to itself, I'm the good guy, therefore I should win. And the bad guy opposite me, well, he's just a trope. He must lose.
Yeah.
Well, the guy across from you might think is evil, and maybe you're even right in a certain way, but he's trying to win. And as Nietzsche pointed out, the bad guys win sometimes. All right. Okay, thanks, David. I'll catch you next time.